In this video, I'm going to carry on reading from Ralph Waldo Emerson's book. We are currently on page 129. This book is called The Complete Essays and Other Writings of Ralph Waldo Emerson. Please do leave your comments in the comment section down below. Please leave your feedback, your thoughts, your ideas, what you take of this exercise, what you think of the book, etc. It'll be much appreciated. Thank you for your kindness. We're going to start from the top of this page. I think it'd be best that way. And we'll start on the sentence nature. Nature is a mutable cloud which is always and never the same. She casts the same thought into troops of forms, as a poet makes 20 fables with one moral. Through a bruteness and toughness of matter, a subtle spirit bends all things to its own will. The adamant streams into soft but precise form before it, and whilst I look at it, its outline and texture are changed again. Nothing is so fleeting as form, yet never does it quite deny itself. In man we still face remains or hints of all that we esteem badges of servitude in the lower races, yet in him they enhance his nobleness and grace, as Io and Aeschylus, transformed to a cow, offends the imagination, but now changed when, as Isis in Egypt, she meets Osiris Jove, a beautiful woman, with nothing of the metamorphosis left but the lunar horns as a splendid ornament of her brows. The identity of history is equally intrinsic, the diversity equally obvious. There is at the surface infinite variety of things. At the center there is simplicity of chords. How many are the acts of one man in which we recognize the same character? Observe the sources of our information in respect to the Greek genius. We have the civil history of that people, as Herodotus, Thucydides, Xenophon, and Plutarch have given it a very sufficient account of what matter of persons they were and what they did. We have the same national mind expressed for us again in the literature, in epic and lyric poems, drama and philosophy. A very complete form. Then we have it once more in the architecture, a beautiful as of temperature itself, limited to the straight line and the square, a builded geometry. Then we have it once again in sculpture, the tongue on the balance of expression, a multitude of forms in the utmost freedom of action, and never transgressing the ideal serenity. Like votaries performing some religious dance before the gods, and though in convulsive pain or moral combat, never daring to break the figure and decorum of their dance. Thus the genius of one remarkable people, we have a foretold representation into the senses, what more unlike than an ode of Pindar, a marble centaur, the peristyle of the Parthenon, and the last actions of Phocion. Every one must have observed faces and forms which, without any resembling feature, make a like impression on the beholder. A particular picture or copy of verses, if it do not awaken the same train of images, will yet superinduce the same sentiment as some wild mountain walk, although the resemblance is nowise obvious to the senses, but is occult and out of the reach of the understanding. Nature is an endless combination and repetition of a very few laws. She hums the old well-known air through innumerable variations. Nature is full of sublime family likeness throughout her works, and delights in startling us with resemblances in the most unexpected quarters. I have seen the head of an old sachem of the forest, which at once reminded the eye of a bald mountain summit, and the furrows of the brow suggested the strata of the rock. There are men whose manners have the same essential splendor as a simple and awful sculpture on the friezes of the Parthenon, and the remains of the earliest Greek art, and there are compositions of the same strain to be found in the books of all ages. What is Guido's Iscleosi Eora, but a morning thought, as the horses in it are only a morning cloud. If any one will but take pains to observe the variety of actions to which he is equally inclined in certain moods of mind, and those to which he is averse, he will see how deep is the chain of affinity. A painter told me that nobody could draw a tree without in some sort becoming a tree, or draw a child by studying the outlines of its form merely, but by watching for a time his motions and plays. The painter enters into his nature, and can then draw him at will in every attitude. So Ross entered into the inmost nature of a sheep. I knew a draughtsman employed in a public survey who found that he could not sketch the rocks until their geological structure was first explained to him. In a certain state of thought is the common origin of very diverse works. It is the spirit and not the fact that is identical. By a deeper apprehension, and not primarily by a painful acquisition of many manual skills, the artist attains the power of awakening other souls to a given activity. It has been said that common souls pay with what they do, noble souls with that which they are. And why? Because a profound nature awakens in us by its actions and words, by its very looks and manners, the same power and beauty that a gallery of sculpture or of pictures addresses. Civil and natural history, the history of art and literature, must be explained from individual history, or must remain words. There is nothing but is related to us, nothing that does not interest us. Kingdom, college, tree, horse, or iron shoe. The roots of all things are in man. Santa Cruz and the dome of St. Peter's are lame copies after a divine model. Strasbourg Cathedral is a material counterpart of the soul of Erwin of Steinberg. The true poem is the poet's mind. The true ship is a shipbuilder. In the man could we lay him open, we should see the reason for the last flourish and tendril of his work, as every spine and tint in the seashell pre-exists in the screening organs of the fish. The whole heraldry and of chivalry is in courtesy. A man of fine manners shall pronounce your name with all the ornament the titles of nobility could ever add. The true experience of every day is always verifying some old prediction to us and converting into things the words and signs which we had heard and seen without heed. A lady with whom I was riding in the forest said to me that the woods always seemed to her to wait, as if the genii who inhabit them suspended their deeds until the wayfarer had passed onward. A thought which poetry has celebrated in the dance of the Furies, which breaks off on the approach of human feet. The man who has seen the rising moon break out of the clouds at midnight has been present like an archangel at the creation of light and of the world. I remember one summer day, in the fields my companion pointed out to me a broad cloud which might extend a quarter of a mile parallel to the horizon, quite accurately in the form of a cherub, as painted over churches, a round block in the center, which it was easy to animate with eyes and mouth supported on either side by wide-stretched symmetrical wings. What appears once in the atmosphere may appear often, and it was undoubtedly the archetype of that familiar ornament. I have seen in the sky a chain of summer lightning, which at once showed to me that the Greeks drew from nature when they pointed the thunderbolts in the hand of Jove. I have seen a snow drift along the sides of a stone wall, which obviously gave the idea of the common architectural scroll to about a tower. By surrounding ourselves with the original circumstances, we invent anew the orders and the ornaments of architecture. As we see how each people merely decorated its primitive abodes. The Doric temple preserved the semblance of the wooden cabin in which the Dorian dwelt. The Chinese pagoda is plainly a Tartar tent. The Indian and Egyptian temples still betray the mounds and subterranean houses of the forebears. The custom of making houses and tombs in the living rock, says Syrian, in his researches on the Ethiopians, determined very naturally the principal character of the Nubian Egyptian architecture to the colossal form which is assumed. In these caverns, already prepared by nature, the eye was accustomed to dwell on huge shapes and masses, so that when art came to the assistance of nature, it could not move on a small scale without degrading itself. What would status of the usual size or neat porches and wings have been associated with those gigantic halls, before which only colossi could sit as watchmen or lean on the pillars of the interior? The Gothic church plainly originated in a rude adaptation of the forest trees, with all the boughs to a festal or solemn arcade, on the bands about the cleft pillars. Still indicate the green width that tie them, no one can walk in a road cut through pine woods without being struck with the architectural appearance of the grove, especially in winter, when the bareness of all other trees shows the low arch of the Saxons. On the woods in a winter afternoon, one will see as readily the origin of the stained glass window with which the Gothic cathedrals are adorned, and the colours of the western sky seen through the bare and crossing branches of the forest. Nor can any lover of nature enter the old piles of Oxford and the English cathedral without feeling that the forest overpowered the mind of the builder, and that this chisel, his saw and plane, still produced its ferns, its spikes of flowers, its locusts, elm, oak, pine, fir, and spruce. The Gothic cathedral is a blossoming in stone, subdued by the insatiable demand of harmony in man. The mountain of granite blooms into an eternal flower with the lightness and delicate finish, as well as the aerial proportions and perspective of vegetable beauty. In like manner, all public facts are to be individualized, all private facts are to be generalized. Then at once history becomes fluid and true, and biography deep and sublime, as the Persian imitated in the slender shafts and capitals of his architecture the stem and flower of the lotus and palm. So the Persian court, in its magnificent era, never gave over the nomadism of its barbarous tribes, but traveled from Ekbatana, where the spring was spent, to Susa in summer, and to Babylon for the winter. In the early history of Asia and Africa, nomadism and agriculture are the two antagonist facts. The geography of Asia and of Africa necessitated a nomadic life, but the nomads were the terror of all those whom the slew of advantages of a market had induced to build towns. Agriculture, therefore, was a religious injunction because of the perils of the state from nomadism. And in these late and civil countries of England and America, these propensities still fight out the old battle in the nation and in the individual. The nomads of Africa were constrained to wander by the tax of all the gadfly, which drives the cattle mad and so compels the tribe to emigrate in the rainy season and to drive off the cattle to the higher sandy regions. The nomads of Asia follow the pasturage from month to month. In America and Europe, the nomadism is a trade and curiosity, a progress certainly from the glad fly of Astaboras to the Anglo and Italomania of Boston Bay, sacred cities to which a periodical religious pilgrimage was enjoined, or stringent laws and customs tending to invigorate the national bond, with a check on the old rovers and the cumulative values of long residence, other restraints on the itinerary of the present day. Antagonism of the two tendencies is not less active in individuals. As the love of adventure or the love of repose happens to predominate, a man of rude health and flowing spirits has the faculty of rapid domestication, lives in his wagon and roams through all latitudes as easily as Kalmuk. At sea or in the forest or in the snow, he sleeps as warm, dines with as good appetite, and associates as happily as beside his own chimneys. Or perhaps his faculty is deeper seated in the increased range of his faculties of observation, which yield him points of interest wherever fresh objects meet his eyes. The pastoral nations were needy and hungry to desperation, and this intellectual nomadism in its excess bankrupts the mind through the dissipation of power on a miscellany of objects. The home-keeping wit, on the other hand, is that continence or content which finds all the elements of life in its own soil, and which has its own perils of monotony and deterioration, if not stimulated by foreign infusions. Everything the individual sees without him corresponds to his state of mind, and everything is in turn intelligible to him, as his onward thinking leads him into the truth to which that fact or series belongs. The primeval world, the foreworld, as the Germans say. I can dive to it in myself, as well as grope for it with researching fingers in catacombs, libraries, and the broken research and torsos of ruined villas. What is the foundation of that interest all men feel in Greek? What is the foundation of all that interests all men feel in Greek history, letters, art, and poetry, in all its periodic, from heroic or Homeric age down to the domestic life of the Athenians and Spartans, 4 or 5 centuries later? What but this, that every man passes personally through a Grecian period? The Grecian state in this era is the era of the bodily nature, the perfection of the senses, of the spiritual nature unfolded in strict unity with the body. In it existed those human forms which supplied the sculptor with his models of Hercules, Phoebus, and Jove, not like the forms abounding in the streets of modern cities, wherein the face is a confused blur of features, but composed of incorrupt, sharply defined, and symmetrical features, whose eye sockets are so formed that it would be impossible for such eyes to squint and take furtive glances on this side and on that, but they must turn the whole head. The manners of that period are plain and fierce. The reverence exhibited is for personal qualities, courage, address, self-command, justice, strength, swiftness, a loud voice, a broad chest. Luxury and elegance are not known. A sparse population, and won't make every man in his own valet, cook, butcher, and soldier, and the habit of supplying his own needs educates the body to wonderful performances. Such are the Agamemnon and Diamond of Homer. And not far different is a picture of Xenophon. Xenophon gives of himself and his companies in the retreat of the 10,000. Quote, after the army had crossed the river of Telebos in Armenia, there fell much snow, and the troops lay miserably on the ground, covered with it. But Xenophon arose naked, and taking an axe, began to split wood, whereupon others rose and did the like. End quote. Throughout his army exists a boundless liberty of speech. They quarrel for plunder. They wrangle with the generals on each new order. And Xenophon is as sharp-tongued as any, and sharper-tongued than most, and so gives as good as he gets. Who does not see that this is a gang of great boys with such a code of honor and such lax discipline as great boys have? The caustic charm of the ancient tragedy, and indeed of all the old literature, that the persons speak as persons who have great good sense without knowing it, before yet the reflective habit had become the predominant habit of the mind. Our admiration of the antique is not admiration of the old, but of the natural. The Greeks are not reflective, but perfect in their senses and in their health, with the finest physical organization in the world. Adults acted with the simplicity and grace of children. They made vases, tragedies, and statues, such as healthy senses should. That is, in good taste. Such things have continued to be made in all ages, and are now wherever a healthy physique exists. But as a class from the superior organization, they have surpassed all. They combine the energy of manhood with the engaging unconsciousness of childhood. The attraction of these manners is that they belong to men, and are known to every man in virtue of his being once a child. Besides that, there are always individuals who retain these characteristics. A person of childlike genius and inborn energy is still a Greek, and revives our love of the muse of Hellas. I admire the look of nature in the Philoctetes, in reading those fine apostrophes to sleep, to the stars, rocks, mountains, and waves. I feel time passing away as an ebbing sea. I feel the eternity of man, the identity of his thought. The Greek had, it seems, the same fellow beings as I. The sun and moon, water and fire, met his heart precisely as they meet mine. Then the vaunted distinction between Greek and English, between classic and romantic schools, seems superficial and pedantic. When a thought of Plato becomes a thought to me, when a truth that fired the soul of Pindar fires mine, time is no more. When I feel that we two meet in perception, that our two souls are tinged with the same hue, and do as it were run into one, why should I measure degrees of latitude? Why should I count Egyptian years? The student interprets the age of chivalry by his own age of chivalry, and the days of maritime adventure and circumnavigation by quite parallel miniature experiences of his own. To the sacred history of the world, he has the same key. When the voice of a prophet, out of the deeps of antiquity, merely echoes to him a sentiment of his infancy, a prayer of his youth, he then pierces to the truth through all the confusion of tradition and caricature of institutions. Rare extravagant spirits come by us at intervals, who disclose to us new facts in nature. I see that men of God have from time to time walked among men and made their commission felt in the heart and soul of the commonest hearer. Hence, evidently, the tripod, the priest, the priestess, inspired by the divine afflatus. Jesus astonishes and overpowers sensual people. They cannot unite him to history or reconcile him with themselves, as they come to revere their institutions and aspire to live holily. Their own piety explains every fact, every word. How easily these old worshippers of Moses or Zoroaster, of Menu, of Socrates, domesticate themselves in the mind. I cannot find any antiquity in them. They are mine as much as theirs. I have seen the first monks and anchorets without crossing seas or centuries. More than once, some individual has appeared to me with such negligence of labor and such commanding contemplation, a hoary beneficiary begging in the name of God, as made good to the 19th century Simon the Stylite, the Thebes, and the first Capuchins. The priestcraft of the East and West, of the Magian, Brahmin, Druid, and Inca, is expounded in the individual's private life. The cramping influence of a hard formalist on a young child, and repressing his spirits and courage, paralyzing understanding, and that without producing indignation, but only fear and obedience, and even much sympathy with the tyranny, is a familiar fact, and even much sympathy with the tyranny is a familiar fact, explained to the child when he becomes a man, only by seeing that the oppressor of his youth is himself. A child tyrannized over by those names and words and forms of whose influence he was merely the organ to the youth. The fact teaches him now. Belus was worshipped, and how the pyramids were built. Better than the discovery by Champollion of the names of all the workmen in the course of every tile. He finds Assyria and the mounds of Cholula at his door, and himself has laid the courses. Again, in that protest, which each considerate person makes against the superstition of his times, he repeats step for step the part of old reformers, and in the search after truth, finds like them new perils to virtue. He learns again what moral vigor is needed to supply the girdle of superstition. A great licentiousness treads on the heels of a reformation. How many times in the history of the world has the Luther of the day had to lament the decay of piety in his own household? I'm going to repeat that. How many times in the history of the world has the Luther of the day had to lament the decay of piety in his own household? Quote, "Doctor," end quote, said his wife to Martin Luther one day. Quote, "How is it that while subject to papacy, we prayed so often and with such fervour, whilst now we pray with the utmost coldness and very seldom?" End quote. The advancing man discovers how deep a property he has in literature. In all fable, as well as in all history, he finds that the poet was no odd fellow who described strange and impossible situations, but that universal man wrote by his pen a confession true for one and true for all. His own secret biography he finds in lines wonderfully intelligible to him, dotted down before he was born, one after another. He comes up in his private adventures with every fable of Aesop, of Homer, of Hafiz, of Ariosto, of Courtier of Scott, and verifies them with his own head and hands. The beautiful fables of the Greeks, being proper creations of the imagination, and not of the fancy, are universal verities. What a range of meanings, and what perpetual pertinence has the story of Prometheus. Beside its primary value as the first chapter of the history of Europe, the mythology thinly veiling authentic facts, the invention of the mechanic arts, and the migration of colonies. It gives a history of religion with some closeness to the faith of later ages. Prometheus is the Jesus of the old mythology. He is the friend of man, stands between the unjust, quote, justice, end quote, of the eternal Father and the race of mortals, and readily suffers all things on their account. But where it departs from the Calvinistic Christianity and exhibits him as the fire of Jove, it represents a state of mind which readily appears wherever the doctrine of theism is caught in a crude, objective form, and which seems the self-confidence of man against this untruth, namely as discontent with the believed fact that a God exists and a feeling that the obligation of reference is wondrous. It would steal if it could the fire of the Creator and live apart from him and independent of him. The Prometheus, Vinctus, and the romance of skepticism, not less true to all time, are the details of that stately apologue. Apollo kept the flocks of Ametis, said the poets. When the gods came among men, they are not known. Jesus was not. Socrates and Shakespeare were not. Antaeus was suffocated by the gripe of Hercules, but every time he touched his mother earth, his strength was renewed. Man is the broken giant, and all his weakness, both his mind and his body, are invigorated by habits of conversation with nature. The power of music, the power of poetry, to unfix and as it were clap wings to solid nature, interprets the riddle of Orpheus. The philosophical perception of identity through endless mutations of form makes him know the part Proteus. What else am I, who laughed or wept yesterday, who slept last night like a corpse, and this morning stood and ran? And what see I, or any side, but the transmigrations of Proteus? I can symbolize my thought by using the name of any creature, of any fact, because every creature is man, agent, or patient. Tantalus is but a name for you and me. Tantalus means the impossibility of drinking the water of thought which are always gleaming and waving within sight of the soul. The transmigration of souls is no fable. I would it were, but men and women are only half human. Every animal of the barnyard, the field, and the forest, of the earth and of the waters, that are under the earth has contrived to get a footing and to leave the print of its features and forms in some one or other of these upright, heaven-facing speakers. Ah, brother, stop the ebb of thy soul, ebbing downward into the forms into whose habits thou hast now for many years slid. As near proper to us is also that old fable of the Sphinx, who is said to sit in the roadside and put riddles to every passenger. If the man could not answer, she swallowed him alive. If he could solve the riddle, the Sphinx was slain. What is our life but an endless flight of winged facts or events, in splendid variety, whose changes come, all putting questions to the human spirit. Those men who cannot answer by a superior wisdom, these facts or questions of time serve them. Facts encumber them. Tyrannize over them, and make the men of routine the men of sense, in which a little obedience to facts has extinguished every spark of that light by which man is truly man. But if a man is true to his better instincts or sentiments, and refuses the dominion of facts, as one that comes of a higher race, remains fast by the soul, and sees the principle, then the facts fall aptly and supply into their places. They know their master, and the meanest of them glorifies him. Seeing Goethe's Helena, the same desire that every word should be a thing. These figures, he would say, these charons, griffins, Phorkaios, Helen, and Leda are somewhat, and do exert a specific influence on the mind. So far, then, are they eternal entities, as real today as in the first Olympiad? Much revolving them, he writes out freely his humor, and gives him body to his own imagination. And although that poem be vague and fantastic as a dream, yet it is much more attractive than the more regular dramatic pieces of the same author, for the reason that it operates a wonderful relief to the mind from the routine of customary images, awakens the reader's invention and fancy by the wild freedom of the design, and by the unceasing succession of brisk shocks of surprise. The universal nature too strong for the petty nature of the bard sits on his neck and writes to his hand, so that when he seems to vent a mere caprice and wild romance, the issue is an exact allegory. Hence Plato said that quote, poets utter great and wise things which they do not themselves understand, end quote. All the fictions of the Middle Ages explain themselves as a masked or frolic expression of that which in grave earnest the mind of that period toiled to achieve. Magic, and all that is ascribed to it, is a deep presentiment of the powers of science, the shoes of swiftness, the sword of sharpness, the power of subduing the elements, or using the secret virtues of minerals, of understanding the voices of birds, and the obscure efforts of the mind in the right direction. The preternatural prowess of the hero, the gifts of perpetual youth, and the like are like the endeavor of the human spirit, to bend the shows of things to the desires of the mind. In Perche Forest and Amadis de Gaul, a garland and a rose bloom on the head of her who is faithful, and fade on the brow of the inconstant. In the story of the boy and the mantle, even a mature reader may be surprised with a glow of virtuous pleasure at the triumph of the gentle Finellas. And indeed, all the postulates of elfin annals, that the Furies do not like to be named, that their gifts are capricious and not to be trusted. That who seeks a treasure must not speak, and the like I find true in Concord, however they might be in Cornwall, or Brett again. It is otherwise in the newest romance. I read The Bride of Lammermoor. Sir William Ashton is a mask for a vulgar temptation. Ravenswood Castle, a fine name for proud poverty, and the foreign mission of state only a bunyan disguised for honest industry. We may all shoot a wild bull that would toss the good and beautiful by fighting down the unjust and sensual. Lucy Ashton is another name for fidelity, which is always beautiful and always liable to calamity in this world. But along with the civil and metaphysical history of man, another history goes daily forward, that of the external world, in which he is not less strictly implicated. He is a compend of time. He is also the correlative of nature. His power consists in the multitude of his affinities, and the fact that his life is intertwined with a whole chain of organic and inorganic being. In old Rome, the public roads, beginning at the Forum, proceeded north, south, east, west, to the center of every province of the empire, making each market town of Persia, Spain, and Britain previous to the soldiers of the capital. So out of the human heart go, as it were, highways to the heart of every object in nature, to reduce it under the domain of man. And man is a bundle of relations, and not of roots, whose flower and fruitage is the world. His faculties refer to natures out of him, and predict the world he is to inhabit. And the fins of the fish foreshow that water exists, or the wings of an eagle and the egg presuppose ear. He cannot live without a world. Put Napoleon in an island prison. Let his faculties find no men to act on, no Alps to climb, no stake to play for, and he would beat the ear and appear stupid. Transport him to large countries, dense population, complex interests, and antagonist power, and you shall see that the man, Napoleon, bounded that is by such a profile and outline, is not the virtual Napoleon. This is but Talbot's shadow. Quote, his substance is not here, for what you see is but the smallest part and least proportion of humanity. But with a whole frame here, it is of such a spacious, lofty pitch, your roof would not sufficient to contain it. End quote. Columbus needs a planet to shape his course upon. Newton and Laplace need myriads of age and thick-strewn celestial areas. One may say, a gravitating solar system is already prophesied in the nature of Newton's mind. Not less does the brain of Davy or of Gay-Lussac from childhood, exploring the affinities and repulsions of particles, anticipate the laws of organization. Does not the eye of the human embryo predict the light? The ear of Handel predict the witchcraft of harmonic sound? Do not the constructive fingers of Watt, Fulton, Whittemore, Arkwright predict the fusible, hard, and temperable texture of metals, the properties of stone, water, and wood? Do not the lovely attributes of the maiden child predict the refinements and decorations of civil society? Here also we are reminded of the action of man on man. In mind, I ponder its thoughts for ages, and not gain so much self-knowledge as the passion of love shall teach it in a day. Who knows himself before he has been thrilled with indignation at an outrage, or has heard an eloquent tongue, or has shared the throb of thousands in a national exultation or alarm? No man can antedate his experience, or guess what faculty or feeling a new object shall unlock, any more than he can draw today the faces of a person whom he shall see tomorrow for the first time. I will now go behind the general statement to explore the reason of this correspondency. Let it suffice that in the light of these two facts, namely that the mind is one and that nature is its correlative, history is to be read and written. Thus and always does the soul concentrate and reproduce its treasure for each pupil. He too shall pass through the whole cycle of experience. He shall collect into a focus the rays of nature. History no longer shall be a dull book. It shall walk incarnate in every just and wise man. You shall not tell me by languages and titles a catalog of the volumes you have read. You shall make me feel what periods you have lived. A man shall be the temple of fame. He shall walk as the poets have described that goddess, in a robe painted all over with wonderful events and experiences. His own form and features, by their exalted intelligence, shall be that variegated vest. I shall find in him the foreworld. In his childhood, the age of gold, the apples of knowledge, the argonautic, expedition, the calling of Abraham, the building of the temple, the advent of Christ, the Dark Ages, the revival of letters, the Reformation, the discovery of new lands, the opening of new sciences and new regions in man. He shall be the priest of Pan, and bring with him into humble cottages the blessing of the morning stars, and all the recorded benefits of heaven and earth. Is this somewhat overweening in his claim? Then I reject all I have written. For what is the use of pretending to know what we know not? But it is a fault of our rhetoric that we cannot strongly state one fact without seeming to belie some other. I hold our actual knowledge very cheap. Hear the rats in the wall, see the lizard on the fence, the fungus underfoot, the lichen on the log. What do I know sympathetically, morally, of either of these worlds of life? As old as a Caucasian man, perhaps older, these creatures have kept their counsel beside him, and there is no record of any word or sign that has passed from one to the other. What connection do the books show between 50 or 60 chemical elements and the historical eras? Nay, what does history yet record of the metaphysical annals of men? What light does it shed on these mysteries which we hide under the names death and immortality? Yet every history should be written in a wisdom which divined the range of our affinities and looked at facts as symbols. I am ashamed to see what a shallow village tale our so-called history is. How many times we must say Rome and Paris and Constantinople. What does Rome know of rat and lizard? What are Olympiads and consulates to these neighboring systems of being? Nay, what food or experience or succor have they for the Esquimaux seal hunter, for the Kanaka and his canoe, for the fisherman the stevedore, the porter? Broader and deeper we must write our annals, from an ethical reformation, from an influx of the ever new, ever sanative conscience. If we would trulier express our sensual and wide-related nature, study this old chronology of selfishness and pride to which we have too long lent our eyes. Already that day exists for us, shines in on us at unawares, but the path of science and of letters is not the way into nature. The idiot, the Indian, the child, an unschooled farmer's boy stand near to the light by which nature is to be read. Then the dissector or the antiquary. That's the end of that book. That book is called The Complete Essays and Other Writings of Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I believe this is the next book, Self-Reliance. It could be part of The Complete Essays and Other Writings of Ralph Waldo Emerson, so I apologize for that. Self-Reliance, quote, Nite quaesiferes extra, end quote. Man is his own star, and the soul that can render an honest and a perfect man, commands all light, all influence, all fate. Nothing to him falls early or too late. Our acts, our angels, are, or good or ill. Our fatal shadows that walk by us still. Epilogue, to Beaumont and Beaumont and Fletcher's honest man for tune. Cast the bantling on the rocks, suckle him with the she-wolf teat, wintered with the hawk and fox, power and speed be hands and feet. I read the other day some verses written by an eminent painter, which were original and not conventional. The soul always hears an admonition in such lines. Let the subject be what it may, the sentiment they instill is of more value than any thought they may contain. To believe your own thought, to believe that what is true for you is your private heart, is true for all men, that is genius. Speak your latent conviction, and it shall be the universal sense. For the inmost, in due time, becomes the utmost. And our first thought is rendered back to us by the trumpet of the last judgment. Familiar as the voice of the mind is to each the highest merit we ascribe to Moses, Plato, and Milton, is that they set at naught books and traditions and spoke not what men, but what they taught, what they thought. A man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of the firmament of bards and sages. Yet he dismisses, never without notice, his thought, because it is his. Let me repeat that. It's very important. A man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of firmament of bards and sages. Yet he dismisses without notice his thought, because it is his. In every work of genius, we recognize our own rejected thoughts. They come back to us with a certain alienated majesty. Great works of art have no more affecting lesson for us than this. They teach us to abide by our spontaneous impression with good-humored inflexibility than most when the whole cry of voices is on the other side. Else tomorrow a stranger will say, with masterly good sense, precisely what we have thought and felt all the time, and we shall be forced to take with shame our opinion from another. There is a time in every man's education when he arrives at the conviction that envy is ignorance, that imitation is suicide, that he must take himself for better for worse as his portion, that though the wide universe is full of good, no kernel of nourishing corn can come to him but through his toil bestowed on the plot of ground which is given to him to till. The power which resides in him is new in nature, and none but he knows what that is which he can do, nor does he know until he has tried. Not for nothing one face, one character, one fact makes much impression on him, and another none. The sculpture in the memory is not without pre-established harmony. The eye was placed where one ray should fall, that it might testify of that particular ray. We but half express ourselves and are ashamed of that divine idea which each of us represents, and may be safely trusted as proportionate and of good issues, so be faithfully imparted. But God will not have his work made manifest by cowards. A man is relieved and gay when he has put his heart into his work and done his best. But what he has said or done otherwise shall give him no peace. It is a deliverance which does not deliver. In the attempt, his genius deserts him. No more be friends, no invention, no hope. Trust thyself. Every heart vibrates to that iron string. Accept the place that divine providence has found for you. The society of your contemporaries, the connection of events. Great men have always done so, and confided themselves childlike to the genius of their age, betraying their perception that the absolutely trustworthy was seated at their heart, working through their hands, predominating in all their being. And we are now men, and must accept in the highest mind the same transcendent destiny, and not minors and invalids in a protected corner, not cowards fleeing before a revolution, but guides, redeemers, and benefactors obeying the almighty effort and advancing on chaos and the dark. What pretty oracles nature yields us on this text, in the face and behavior of children, babies, and even brutes. That divided and rebel mind, that distrust of a sentiment because our arithmetic has computed the strength and means opposed to our purpose. These have not. Their mind being whole, their eye is as yet unconquered. And when we look in their faces, we are disconcerted. Infancy conforms to nobody. All conform to it. So that one baby commonly makes 4 or 5 out of the adults who prattle and play to it. So God has armed youth and puberty and mannered no less with its own piquancy and charm, and made it enviable and gracious. And its claims not to be put by, if it will stand by itself. Do not think the youth has no force, because he cannot speak to you and me. Hark! In the next room his voice is sufficiently clear and emphatic. It seems he knows how to speak to his contemporaries. Bashful or bold then, he will know how to make us seniors very unnecessary. The nonchalance of boys who are sure of a dinner, and would disdain as much as a lord to do or say aught to consolate one, is the healthy attitude of human nature. A boy is in the parlor when the pit is in the playhouse. Independent, irresponsible, looking out from his corner on such people and facts as pass by, he tries and sentences them on their merits, in the swift summary way of boys, as good, bad, interesting, silly, eloquent, troublesome. He cumbers himself never about consequences, about interests. He gives an independent, genuine verdict. You must court him. He does not court you. But the man is, as it were, clapped into jail by his consciousness. As soon as he has once acted or spoken with eclat, he is a committed person, watched by the sympathy or the hatred of hundreds, whose affections must now enter into his account. There is no lethe for this. Ah, that he could pass again into his neutrality. Who can thus avoid all pledges, and having observe again from the same unaffected, unbiased, unbribable, unaffrighted innocence, must always be formidable. He would utter opinions on all passing affairs, which being seen to be not private, but necessary, would sink like darts into the ear of men and put them in fear. These are the voices which we hear in solitude, but they grow faint and inaudible as we enter into the world. Society everywhere is in conspiracy against the manhood of every one of its members. Society is a joint stock company in which the members agree for the better securing of his bread to each shareholder, to surrender the liberty and culture of the eater. The virtue in most request is conformity. Self-reliance is its aversion. It loves not realities and creators, but names and customs. Whoso would be a man must be a conformist. He who would gather immortal palms must not be hindered by the name of goodness, but must explore if it be goodness. Nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of your own mind. Absolve you to yourself, and you shall have the suffrage of the world. I remember an answer which, when quite young, I was prompted to make to a valued adviser who was wont to importune me with the dear old doctrines of the church. On my saying, "What have I to do with the sacredness of traditions, if I live wholly from within?" My friend suggested, quote, "But these impulses may be from below, not from above," end quote. I replied, quote, "They do not seem to me to be such, but if I am the devil's child, I will live then from the devil," end quote. No law can be sacred to me but that of my nature. Good and bad are but names very readily transferable to that or this. The only right is what is after my constitution. The only wrong, what is against it. A man is to carry himself in the presence of all opposition as if everything were titular and ephemeral but he. I am ashamed to think how easily we capitulate to badges and names, to large societies and dead institutions. Every decent and well-spoken individual affects and sways me more than is right. I ought to go upright and vital, and speak the rude truth in all ways. If malice and vanity wear the coat of philanthropy, shall that pass? If an angry bigot assumes this bountiful cause of abolition, and comes to me with his last news from Barbados, why should I not say to him, "Go love thy infant, love thy woodchopper, be good-natured and modest, have that grace, and never varnish your hard, uncharitable ambition with this incredible tenderness for black folk 1,000 miles off. Thy love afar is spite at home, rough and graceless, would be such greeting, but truth is handsomer than the affection of love. Your goodness must have some edge to it, else it is none. The doctrine of hatred must be preached as the counteraction of the doctrine of love. When that pulls and whines, I shun father and mother and wife and brother when my genius calls me. I was right on the lintels of the doorpost whim. I hope it is somewhat better than whim at last. But we cannot spend a day in explanation. Expect me not to show cause why I seek or why I exclude company. Then again, do not tell me, as a good man did today, of my obligation to put all poor men in good situations. Are they my poor? I tell thee, thou foolish philanthropist, that I grudge the dollar, the dime, the cent. I give to such men as do not belong to me, and to whom I do not belong. There is a class of persons to whom, by all spiritual affinity, I am bought and sold. For them I will go to prison, if need be. But your miscellaneous popular charities, the education at college of fools, the building of meeting houses to the vain, and to which many now stand, alms to sots, and the thousand-fold relief societies, though I confess with shame, I sometimes succumb and give the dollar. It is a wicked dollar, which by and by I shall have the manhood to withhold. Virtues are, in the popular estimate, rather the exception than the rule. There is the man and his virtues. Men do what is called a good action, as some piece of courage or charity, much as they would pay a fine in expiation of daily non-appearance on parade. Their works are done as an apology or extenuation of their living in the world. As invalids and the insane pay a high board, the virtues are penances. I do not wish to expiate, but to live. My life is for itself, and not for spectacle. I much prefer that it should be of a low strain, so it be genuine and equal. Than that it should be glittering and unsteady. I wish it to be sound and sweet, and not to need diet and bleeding. I ask primary evidence that you are a man and refuse this appeal from the man to his actions. I know that for myself it makes no difference whether I do or forbear those actions which are reckoned excellent. I cannot consent to pay for a privilege where I have intrinsic right. Few and mean as my gifts may be, I actually am, and do not need for my own assurance or the assurance of my fellows any secondary testimony. What I must do is all that concerns me, not what the people think. This rule, equally arduous in actual and in intellectual life, may serve for the whole distinction between greatness and meanness. It is the harder because you will always find those who think they know what is your duty better than you know it. It is easy in the world to live after the world's opinion. It is easy in solitude to live after our own. But the great man is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude. The objection to conforming to usages that have become dead to you is that it scatters your force. It loses your time and blurs the impression of your character. If you maintain a dead church, contribute to a dead Bible society, vote with a great party either for the government or against it, spread your table like base housekeepers. Under all these screens, I have difficulty to detect the precise man you are. And of course, so much force is withdrawn from your proper life. But do you work, and I shall know you? But do you work, and I shall know you? Do you work, and you shall reinforce yourself? A man must consider what a blind man's buff is this game of conformity. If I know your sect, I anticipate your argument. I hear a preacher announce for his text and topic of expediency of one of the institutions of his church. Do I not know beforehand that not possibly can he say a new and spontaneous word? Do I not know that with all this ostentation of examining the ground of the institution, he would do no such thing? Do I not know that he is pledged to himself not to look but at one side, the permitted side, not as a man but as a parish minister? He is a retained attorney, and these ears of the bench are the emptiest affectation. While most men have bound their eyes with one or another handkerchief, and attach themselves to one of these communities of opinion. This conformity makes them not false in a few particulars, authors of a few lies, but false in all particulars. Their every truth is not quite true. Their two is not the real two. Their four, not the real four. So that every word they say jargons us, and we know not where to begin to set them right. Meantime, nature is not slow to equip us in the prison uniform of the party to which we adhere. We come to wear one cut of face and figure and acquire by degrees the gentlest asinine expression. There is a mortifying experience in particular, which does not fail to wreck itself also in the general history. I mean the foolish face of praise. The forced smile which we put on in company where we do not feel at ease. An answer to conversation which does not interest us. The muscles not spontaneously moved, but moved by low usurping willfulness. Grow tight about the outline of the face with the most disagreeable sensation. For nonconformity, the world whips you with its displeasure, and therefore a man must know how to estimate a sour face. The bystanders look askance on him in the public street or in the friend's parlor. If this aversion had its origin in contempt and resistance like his own, he might well go home with a sad countenance. But the sour faces of multitude, like the sweet faces, have no deep cools, but are put on and off as the wind blows and a newspaper directs. Yet is the discontent of the multitude more formidable than that of the Senate and the college? It is easy enough for a man who knows the world to brook the rage of the cultivated class. Their rage is decorous and prudent, for they are timid, as being very vulnerable themselves. But when to the feminine rage, the indignation of the people is added. When the ignorant and the poor are aroused, when the unintelligent brute force that lies at the bottom of society is made to growl and mow, it needs the habit of magnanimity and religion to treat it godlike as the trifle of no concernment. The other terror that scares us from self-trust is our consistency, a reverence for our past, act or word, because the eyes of others have no other data for computing our orbit than our past acts, and we are loath to disappoint them. But why should you keep your head over your shoulders? Why drag about this corpse of your memory, lest you contradict somewhat you have stated in this or that public place? Suppose you should contradict yourself. What then? It seems to be a rule of wisdom, never to rely on your memory alone, scarcely even in acts of pure memory, but to bring the past for judgment into the thousand-eyed present and live ever in a new day. In your metaphysics, you have denied personality to the deity. Yet when devout motions of the soul come, yield to them heart and life. Though they should clothe God with shape and color, leave your theory as Joseph his coat in the hand of the harlot and flee. A foolish consistency is a hobo goblin of little minds, adored by little statesmen and philosophers and divines. With consistency, a great soul has simply nothing to do. He may as well concern himself with his shadow on the wall. Speak what you think now, in other words, and tomorrow speak what tomorrow thinks, in other words again, though it contradicts everything you said today. So you shall be sure to be misunderstood. It is so bad then to be misunderstood. Sorry, I'll repeat that. So you shall be sure to be misunderstood. Is it so bad then to be misunderstood? Pythagoras was misunderstood, and Socrates and Jesus and Luther and Copernicus and Galileo and Newton and every pure and wise spirit that ever took flesh. To be great is to be misunderstood. I suppose no man can violate his nature. All of the sallies of his will are rounded in by the law of his being. All the inequalities of Andes and Himalaya are insignificant in the curve of the sphere. Nor does it matter how you gorge and try him. A character is like an acrostic of Alexandrian stanza. Read it forward, backward, or across. It still spells the same thing. In this pleasing, contrite wood life which God allows me, let me record day by day my honest thought without prospect or retrospect. And I cannot doubt it will be found symmetrical, though I mean it not and see it not. My book should not smell of pines and resound with the hum of insects. The swallow over my window should interweave that thread or straw he carries in his bill into my web also. We pass for what we are. Character teaches above our wills. Men imagine that they communicate their virtue or vice only by overt actions, and do not see that virtue or vice emit a breath every moment. There will be an agreement in whatever variety of actions, so there be each honest and natural in their hour. For of one will. Actions will be harmonious, however unlike they seem. These varieties are lost sight of a little distance at a little height of thought. One tendency unites them all, the voyage of the best ship, is a zigzag line of 100 tacks. See the line from a sufficient distance, and it straightens itself to the average tendency. Your genuine action will explain itself and will explain your other genuine actions. Your conformity explains nothing. Act singly, and what you have already done singly will justify you now. Greatness appeals to the future. If I can be firm enough today to do right and scorn eyes, I must have so much right before as to defend me now. Be it how it will, do right now. Always scorn appearances, and you always may. The force of character is cumulative. All the foregone days of virtue work their health into this. What makes the majesty of the heroes of the Senate in the field, which so fills the imagination? The consciousness of a train of great days and victories behind. They shed a united light on the advancing actor. He is attended as by a visible escort of angels. That is it which throws thunder in Chatham's voice, and dignity in Washington's port, and America into Adam's eye. Honor is venerable to us because it is no ephemera. No ephemera. It is always ancient virtue. We worship it today because it is not of today. We love it and pay it homage because it is not a trap for our love and homage, but is self-dependent, self-derived, and therefore of old, immaculate pedigree, even if shown in a young person. I hope these days we have heard the last conformity and consistency. Let the words be gazetted and ridiculous henceforth. Instead of the gong for dinner, let us hear a whistle from the Spartan fife. Let us never bow and apologize more. A great man is coming to eat at my house. I do not wish to please him. I wish that he should please. I wish that he should wish to please me. I will stand here for humanity. And though I would make it kind, I would make it true, let us affront and reprimand this smooth mediocrity and squalid contentment of the times, and hurl in the face of custom and trade and office the fact which is the upshot of all history, that there is a great responsible thinker, an actor working whenever a man works, that a true man belongs to no other time or place, but is the center of things. Where he is, there is nature. He measures you and all men and all events. Ordinarily, everybody in society reminds us of someone else or some other person. Character, reality, reminds you of nothing else. It takes place of a whole creation. The man must be so much that he must make all circumstances indifferent. Every true man is a cause, a country, and an age, requires infinite spaces and numbers, and a time fully to accomplish his design. And posterity seems to follow his steps as a train of clients. A man Caesar is born, and for ages after we have a Roman Empire. Christ is born, and millions of minds so grow and cleave to his genius that he is confounded with virtue and the possible of man. An institution is the lengthened shadow of one man, as monarchism of the hermit Antony, the Reformation of Luther, Quakerism of Fox, Methodism of Wesley, abolition of Clarkson, Scipio Milton, called the height of Rome, and all history resolves itself very easily into the biography of a few stout and earnest persons. Let a man then know his worth and keep things under his feet. Let him not peep or steal or skulk up and down with the ear of a charity boy, a bastard, or an interloper in the world which exists for him. But the man in the street, finding no worth in himself, which corresponds to the force, which built a tower or sculptured a marble god, feels poor when he looks on these. To him, a palace, a statue, or a costly book have an alien and forbidding air, much like a gay equipage, and it seemed to say, like that, "Who are you, sir?" Yet they all are his, suitors for his notice, petitioners to his faculties, and they will come out and take possession. The picture waits for my verdict. It is not to command me, but I am to settle its claims to praise. That popular fable of the sot who was picked up dead drunk in the street, carried to the Duke's house, washed and dressed and laid in the Duke's bed, and on his waking, treated with all obsequious ceremony like the Duke, and assured that he had been insane, owes its popularity to the fact that it symbolizes so well the state of man, who is in the world is sort of salt, but now and then wakes up, exercises his reason, and finds himself a true prince. Our reading is mendicant and sycophantic. In history, our imagination plays us fools. Kingdom and lordship, power and estate are a gaudier vocabulary than Private John and Edward in a small house and common day's work. But the things of life are the same to both. The sum total of both is the same. Why all this deference to Alfred and Skanderberg? Alfred and Skanderberg and Gustavus. Suppose they were virtuous. They did not wear out virtue. As great a stake depends on your private act today as follow their public and renowned steps. When private men shall act with original views, the luster will be transferred from the actions of kings to those of gentlemen. The world has been instructed by its kings, who have so magnetized the eyes of nations. It has been taught by this colossal symbol the mutual reverence that is due from man to man. The joyful loyalty with which men have everywhere suffered the king, the noble, or the great proprietor to walk among them by a law of his own. Make his own scale of men and things and reverse theirs. Pay for benefits not with money but with honor, and represent the law in his person. Was the hieroglyphic by which they obscurely signified the consciousness of their own right and comeliness, the right of every man? The magnetism which all original action exerts is explained when we acquire the reason of self-trust. Who is the trustee? What is the aboriginal self on which a universal reliance may be grounded? What is the nature and power of that science-baffling star without parallax, without calculable elements, which shoots a ray of beauty even into trivial and impure actions? If the least mark of independence appear, the inquiry leads us to that source at once, the essence of genius, of virtue, and of life, which we call spontaneity or instinct. We denote this primary wisdom as institution, whilst all later teachings and tuitions, and that deep force, the last fact behind which analysis cannot go, all things find their common origin. For the sense of being which in calm hours rises we know not how, in the soul, is not diverse from things, from space, from light, from time, from man, but one with them, and proceeds obviously from the same source whence their life and being also proceed. We first share the life by which things exist, and afterwards see them as appearances in nature, and forget that we have shared their cause. Here is the fountain of action and of thought. Here are the lungs of that inspiration, which giveth man wisdom, and which cannot be denied without impiety and atheism. We lie in the lap of immense intelligence, which makes us receivers of its truth and organs of its activity. When we discern justice, when we discern truth, we do nothing of ourselves, but allow a passage to its beams. If we ask whence this comes, if we seek to pry into the soul that causes all philosophy is at fault, its presence or its absence is all we can affirm. Every man discriminates between the voluntary acts of his mind and his involuntary perceptions, and knows that to his involuntary perceptions a perfect faith is due. He may err in the expression of them, but he knows that these things are so, like day and night, not to be disputed. By willful actions and acquisitions, my willful actions and acquisitions are but roving. Idlest reverie, faintest native emotion, command my curiosity and respect. Thoughtless people contradict as readily the statement of perceptions as of opinions. Let me repeat that. Thoughtless people contradict as readily the statement of perceptions as of opinions. Or rather, much more readily, for they do not distinguish between perception and notion. They fancy that I choose to see this or that thing, but perception is not whimsical, but fatal. If I see a trait, my children will see it after me. And in the course of time, all mankind, although it may chance that no one has seen it before me, for my perception of it is as much a fact as the sun. The relations of the soul to the divine spirit are so pure that it is profane to talk, to interpose helps. It must be that when God speaketh, he should communicate not one thing, but all things, should fill the world with his voice, should scatter forth light, nature, time, souls from the center of the present thought, and new date and new create the whole. Whenever a mind is simple and receives a divine wisdom, all things pass away. Means, teachers, texts, temples fall. It lives now and absorbs past and future into the present hour. All things are made sacred by relation to it, one as much as another. All things are dissolved by the center, by their cause. And in the universal miracle, petty and particular miracles disappear. If therefore a man claims to know and speak of God, and carries you backward to the phraseology of some old mouldered nation, in other country, in other world, believe him not. Is the acorn better than the oak? Is the acorn better than the oak, which is its fullness and completion? Is the parent better than the child into whom he has cast his ripened being? Whence then this worship of the past? The centuries are conspirators against the sanity and authority of the soul. Time and space are but physiological colors, which the eye makes, but the soul is light. Where it is day. Where it was is night. But the soul is light. Where it is day. Where it was is night. And history is an impertinence and an inquiry. It may be. And history is an impertinence and an injury, if it be anything more than a cheerful apologue or parable of my being and becoming. Man is timid and apologetic. He's no longer upright. He dares not say, I think, I am, but quotes some saint or sage. He's ashamed before the blade of grass or the blowing rose. These roses under my window make no reference to former roses or to better ones. They are for what they are. They exist with God today. There's no time to them. There is simply the rose. It is perfect in every moment of its existence. Before a leaf bud has burst, its whole life acts. In the full-blown flower, there is no more. In the leafless root, there is no less. Its nature is satisfied, and it satisfies nature in all moments alike. But man postpones or remembers. He does not live in the present, but with reverted eye laments the past, or heedless of the riches that surround him. Stands on tiptoe to foresee the future. He cannot be happy and strong until he too lives with nature and the present above time. This should be plain enough. Yet see what strong intellects dare not yet hear God himself, unless he speak the phraseology of I know not what David or Jeremiah or Paul. We shall not always set so great a price on a few texts, on a few lives. We are like children who repeat by rote the sentences of grandmas and tutors, and as they grow older, of the men of talents and character they chance to see, painfully recollecting the exact words they spoke. Afterwards, when they come into the point of view which those had who uttered these sayings, they understand them and are willing to let the words go. For at any time, they can use words as good when occasion comes. If we live truly, we shall see truly. It is easy for the strong man to be strong, as it is for the weak to be weak. When we have new perception, we shall gladly disburden the memory of its hoarded treasures as old rubbish. When a man lives with God, his voice shall be as sweet as the murmur of the brook and the rustle of the corn. And now, at last, the highest truth on the subject remains unsaid, probably cannot be said, for all that we say is the far-off remembering of the intuition. That thought by what I can now nearest approach to say it is this: when good is near you, when you have life in yourself, it is not by any known or accustomed way. You shall not discern the footprints of any other. You shall not see the face of man. You shall not hear any name. The way, the thought, the good shall be wholly strange and new. It shall exclude example and experience. You take the way from man, not to man. All persons that ever existed are its forgotten ministers. Fear and hope are like beneath it. They are somewhat low, even in hope. Oh, in the hour of vision, there is nothing that can be called gratitude, nor properly joy. The soul raised over passion beholds identity and eternal causation, perceives the self-existence of truth and right, and calms himself with knowing that all things go well. Vast spaces of nature, the Atlantic Ocean, the South Sea, long intervals of time, years, centuries, are no count. This which I think and feel underlay every former state of life and circumstances, as it does underlie my present and what is called life and what is called death. Life only avails not the having lived. Power ceases in the instant of repose. It resides in the moment of transition from a past to a new state, in the shooting of the gulf, in the darting to an aim. This one fact the world hates, that the soul becomes, for that forever degrades the past, turns all riches to poverty, all reputation to a shame, confounds the saint with the rogue, shoves Jesus and Judas equally aside, Why then do we prate of self-reliance? Inasmuch as the soul is present, there will be power, not confident, but agent. Let me repeat that. Why then do we prate of self-reliance? Inasmuch as the soul is present, there will be power, not confident, but agent. To talk of reliance in a poor external way of speaking, to talk of reliance as a poor external way of speaking. Speak rather of that which relies because it works and is. Let me repeat that. To talk of reliance as a poor external way of speaking. Speak rather of that which relies because it works and is. Who has more obedience than I masters me? Though he should not raise his finger, round him I must revolve by the gravitation of spirits. We fancy it rhetoric when we speak. Just a moment. Round him, Round him I must revolve by the gravitation of spirits. We fancy it rhetoric when we speak of eminent virtue. We do not see that virtue is height, and that a man or a company of men, plastic and permeable to principles by the law of nature, must overpower and ride all cities, nations, kings, rich men, poets who are not. This is the ultimate fact which we so quickly reach on this. As on every topic, the resolution of all into the ever-blessed one. Self-existence is the attribute of the supreme cause, and it constitutes the measure of good by the degree in which it enters into all lower forms. All things real are so by so much virtue as they contain. Commerce, husbandry, hunting, whaling, war, eloquence, personal weight are somewhat and engage my respect as examples of its presence. And in pure action, I see the same law working in nature for conservation and growth. Power is, in nature, the essential measure of right. Power is, in nature, the essential measure of right. Nature suffers nothing than to remain in her kingdoms, which cannot help itself. The genesis and maturation of a planet, its poise in orbit, the bended tree recovering itself from the strong wind, the vital resources of every animal and vegetable are demonstrations of the self-sufficing and therefore self-relying soul. Self-sufficing and therefore self-relying soul. Thus all concentrates. Let us not rove. Let us sit at home with the cause. Let us stun and astonish the intruding rabble of men and books and institutions by a simple declaration of a divine fact. Bid invaders take the shoes from off their feet, for God is here within. Let our simplicity judge them, and our docility to our own law demonstrate the poverty of nature and fortune beside our native riches. But now we are a mob. Man does not stand in awe of man, nor is his genius admonished to stay at home, to put itself in communication with the internal ocean, but it goes abroad to beg a cup of water of the urns of other men. We must go alone. I like the silent church before the service begins, better than and preaching. How far off, how cool, how chaste the person's look. Begirt each one with a precinct of sanctuary. So let us always sit. Why should we assume the faults of our friends, or wife, or father, or child, because they sit around our hearth, or are said to have the same blood? All men have my blood, and I all men. Not for that will I adapt their petulance or folly, even to the extent of being ashamed of it. But your isolation must not be mechanical. but spiritual. That is, must be elevation. At times, the whole world seems to be in conspiracy to importune you with emphatic trifles. Friend, client, child, sickness, fear, want, charity all knock at once at thy closet door and say, "Come out unto us, but keep thy state. Come not into their confusion." The power men possess to annoy me, and I give them by a weak curiosity. No man can come near me, but I through my act. Quote, "What we love, that we have, but by desire we bereave ourselves of the love." End quote. Let me repeat that. Quote, "What we love, that we have, but by desire we bereave ourselves of the love." If we cannot at once rise to the sanctities of obedience and faith, let us at least resist our temptations. Let us enter into the state of war, and week 4 and 1, courage and constancy in our Saxon breasts. This is to be done in our smooth times by speaking the truth. Check this lying hospitality and lying affection. Live no longer to the expectation of these deceived and deceiving people with whom we converse. Say to them, "O father, O mother, O wife, O brother, O friend, I have lived with you after appearances hitherto. Henceforward, I am the truth. Be it known unto you that henceforward I obey no law less than the eternal law. I will have no covenants, but proximities. I shall endeavor to nourish my parents, to support my family, to be the chaste husband of one wife. But these relations I must fill after a new and unprecedented way. I appeal from your customs. I must be myself. I cannot break myself any longer for you or you. If you can love me for what I am, we shall be the happier. If you cannot, I will still seek to deserve that you should. I will not hide my tastes or aversions. I will so trust that what is deep is holy, that I will do strongly before the sun and moon whatever inly rejoices me and the heart appoints. If you are noble, I will love you. If you are not, I will not hurt you. And myself by hypocritical attentions. If you are true, but not in the same truth with me, cleave to your companions. I will seek my own. I do this selfishly, but humbly. I do this not selfishly, but humbly and truly. It is alike your interests and mine, and all men, however long we have dwelt in lies, to live in truth. Does this sound harsh today? You will soon love what is dictated by your nature, as well as mine. And if we follow the truth, it will bring us out safe at last. But so may you give these friends pain. Yes, but I cannot sell my liberty and my power to save their sensibility. Besides, all persons have their moments of reason. When they look out into the region of absolute truth, then will they justify me and do the same thing. The populist thing that your rejection of popular standards is a rejection of all standard, and mere antinomianism, and the bold sensualist will use the same philosophy to gild his crimes. But the law of consciousness abides. There are two confessionals, in one or the other, of which we must be shriven. You may fulfill your round of duties by clearing yourself in the direct or in the reflex way. Consider whether you have satisfied your relations to father, mother, cousin, neighbor, town, cat, and dog, whether any of these can upbraid you. But I may also neglect this reflex standard and absolve me to myself. I have my own stern claims and perfect circle. It denies the name of duty to many offices that are called duties. But if I can discharge its debts, it enables me to dispense with the popular code. If anyone imagines that this law is lax, let him keep his commandment one day. And truly, it demands something godlike in him, who has cast off the common motives of humanity, and has ventured to trust himself for a taskmaster. High be his heart, faithful his will, clear his sight, that he may, in good earnest, be doctrine, society law to himself, that a simple purpose may be to him as strong as iron necessity is to others. If a man consider the present aspects of what is called by distinction society, he will see the need of these ethics. The sinew and heart of man seem to be drawn out, and we are become timorous, desponding whimperers. We are afraid of truth, afraid of fortune, afraid of death, and afraid of each other. Our age yields no great and perfect persons. We want men and women. We want men and women who shall resonate. I beg your pardon. We are afraid of truth, afraid of fortune, afraid of death, and afraid of each other. Our age yields no great and perfect persons. We want men and women who shall renovate life and our social state. But we see that most natures are insolvent, cannot satisfy their own wants, have an ambition out of all proportion to their practical force, and do lean and beg day and night continually. Our housekeeping is mendicant. Our arts, our occupations, our marriages, our religion, we have not chosen, but society has chosen for us. We are parlor soldiers. We shun the rugged battle of fate. With strength is born. If our young men miscarry in their first enterprises, they lose all heart. If the young merchant fails, men say he is ruined. I'm going to repeat that again. If our young men miscarry in their first enterprises, they lose all heart. If the young merchant fails, men say he is ruined. If the finest genius studies at one of our colleges and is not installed in an office within 1 year afterwards, in the cities or suburbs of Boston or New York, it seems to his friends, and to himself that he is right in being disheartened and in complaining the rest of his life. A sturdy lad from New Hampshire or Vermont, who in turn tries all the professions, who teams it, farms it, peddles, keeps a school, preaches, edits a newspaper, goes to Congress, buys a township, and so forth. In successive years, and always like a cat falls on his feet, is worth 100 of these city dolls. He walks abreast with his days and feels no shame in not studying a profession, for he does not postpone his life, but lives already. He has not one chance, but 100 chances. Let a stoic open the resources of man, and tell men they are not leaning willows, but can and must detach themselves, that with the exercise of self-trust, new powers shall appear. That a man is the Word made flesh, born to shed healing to the nations, that he should be ashamed of our compassion, and that the moment he acts from himself, tossing the laws, the books, the idolatries, and customs out of the window, we pity him no more, but thank and revere, and that teacher shall restore the life of man to splendor and make his name dear to all history. It is easy to see that a greater self-reliance must work a revolution in all the offices and relations of men, in their religion, in their education, in their pursuits, their modes of living, their association, in their poverty, and their speculative views. In what praise do men allow themselves? In what praise do men allow themselves? That which they call a holy office is not so much as brave and manly. Let me repeat that. 1. In what prayers do men allow themselves? That which they call a holy office is not so much as brave and manly. Prayer looks abroad and asks for some foreign addition to come through, some foreign virtue, and loses itself in endless mazes of natural and supernatural and mediatorial and miraculous. Prayer that craves a particular commodity, anything less than all good, is vicious. Prayer is the contemplation of the facts of life from the highest point of view. It is the soliloquy of a beholding and jubilant soul. It is the Spirit of God pronouncing his works good. But prayer, as a means to effect a private end, and is meanness and theft. It supposes dualism and not unity in nature and consciousness. As soon as a man is at one with God, he will not beg. He will then see prayer in all action. The prayer of the farmer kneeling in his field to weed it. The prayer of the rower kneeling with the stroke of his oar. Are true prayers heard throughout nature. Though for cheap ends, Karatak in Fletcher's Benduka, when admonished to inquire the mind of the gods, Audate replies, his hidden meaning lies in our endeavors. Our valors are our best gods. I'm going to finish this video. We're going to carry on the next video. Please share your thoughts, your comments, your insights, your feedback. It's very important to me. I look forward to seeing it. How do you feel about the ideas I'm sharing? How do you feel about the spiritual teachings? What are your thoughts? Please share in the comment section down below, and please smash the like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so now. Have a lovely day and keep on shining your beautiful light. I love you.